Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paramahansa Sutarsati Shushimad Abhayacharna Vinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paramahansa Sutarsati Shushimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Didandi Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Gangamayi Ki Jai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Srimati Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Brihat Mridanga Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Jaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Jayam Mudiraye. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayeshvabad Reshu Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in the classes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service unto the pure devotees, all that is inauspicious within the heart is practically destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idang Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Danyang Swasthaya Namahat. This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it was compiled by the incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. So, the title of the talk today is Time on Your Side? And so I found there's a very nice verse in the 3rd canto, 10th chapter, Divisions of the Creation. And this is Maitreya. Actually, the verse starts off Maitreya Uvacha.
Which chapter?
It's chapter 10 and verse 11. Maitreya Uvacha Guna Vyatikarakaro Nirvishesho Pratishtata Purushastad Upadanam Atmanam Lilayasrijat
Atmanam Lilayasrijat
Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Atmanam Lilaya Sujat.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Anybody else?
Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha. Gunavyati Karakaro.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Anybody else?
Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Gunavyati Karakaro.
Nirvishesha Apratishti.
Nirvishesho Pratishtita.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Purushastad Upadanam.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat.
Atmanam Lilaya Srijat. Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya said.
Maitreya said.
Guna Vyatikara.
Gunavyati
Of the interactions of the modes of material nature.
Of the interactions of the modes of material nature.
Akara.
Akara.
Source.
Source.
Nirvishesha.
Nirvishesha.
Without diversity.
Without diversity.
Apratishtitaha.
Apratishtaha.
Unlimited.
Unlimited.
Purusha.
Purusha.
Of the Supreme Person.
Of the Supreme Person.
Tat.
Tat.
That.
There.
Upadanam.
Upadanam.
Instrument.
Instrument.
Atmanam.
Atmanam.
The material creation.
Material creation.
Lilaya.
Lilaya.
By pastimes.
By pastimes.
Asrijat.
Asrijat.
Created.
Created.
Translation. Maitreya said, eternal time is the primeval source of the interactions of the three modes of material nature. It is unchangeable and limitless, and it works as the instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his pastimes in the material creation. Please repeat. Maitreya said, eternal time is the primeval source
Is the primary source
of the interactions
of the interactions
of the three modes of material nature.
of the three modes of material nature.
It is unchangeable and limitless,
It is unchangeable and limitless,
and it works as the instrument
And
it works as the instrument
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead
of the
of the
Supreme
personality
Personality
of God
for his pastimes in the material creation.
for his pastimes of material creation.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The impersonal time factor is the background of the material manifestation as the instrument of the Supreme Lord. It is the ingredient of assistance offered to material nature. No one knows where time began and where it ends, and it is time only which can keep a record of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material manifestation. This time factor is the material cause of creation and is therefore a self-expansion of the personality of God. Time is considered the impersonal feature of the Lord. The time factor is also explained by modern men in various ways. Some accept it almost as it is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. For example, in Hebrew literature, time is accepted in the same spirit as a representation of God. It is stated therein, God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time, passed unto the fathers by the prophets. End quote. Metaphysically, time is distinguished as absolute and real. Absolute time is continuous and is unaffected by the speed or slowness of material things. Time is astronomically and mathematically calculated in relation to the speed, change, and life of a particular object. Factually, however, time has nothing to do with the relativities of things. Rather, everything is shaped and calculated in terms of the facility offered by time. Time is the basic measurement of the activity of our senses, by which we calculate past, present, and future. But in factual calculation, time has no beginning and no end. Chanakya Pandit says that even a slight fraction of time cannot be purchased with millions of dollars, and therefore even a moment of time lost without profit must be calculated as the greatest loss in life. Time is not subject to any form of psychology, nor are the moments objective realities in themselves, but they are dependent on particular experiences. Therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami concludes that the time factor is intermixed with the activities, actions, and reactions of the external energy of the Lord. The external energy, or material nature, works under the superintendence of the time factor as the Lord himself. And that is why material nature appears to have produced so many wonderful things in the cosmic manifestation. In Bhagavad Gita 9:10, confirms this conclusion as follows. Maya dyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena konteya jagat viparivartate. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. It's pretty heavy stuff. Everybody is trying to understand time. It is what they call the fourth dimension. You know, there's height, length, width, and time. And time is a direct manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we have learned previously in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada states in the second canto, that in the spiritual world, time is conspicuous by its absence. There is no time in the spiritual sky. And yet, we always talk about the pastimes of the Lord. But these pastimes are eternal, and they are ever fresh. In the material world, what is the effect of time in the material world? Does anybody want to hazard that? Pretty simple. Anybody?
Destruction?
Destruction, exactly. Everything, like if this building, if it wasn't maintained by people like yourself, it would just fall apart, right? And everything, you know, even the rocks are gradually wearing away. I mean, everything in the material world just wears away constantly. And our life is wearing away constantly. We're born, but Srila Prabhupada explains that actually, one time Srila Prabhupada was asked, or he asked the devotees, who is old? And you know, some of the devotees said, oh, somebody who's over 75. Prabhupada said, what? Well, that's old. And Prabhupada said, no, actually old means who is closest to death? And who amongst us knows how close we are to death? None of us. So we have no idea who is the oldest person in this room. Who is going to be the next one to die? So, armed with that knowledge, really human beings should be very careful as to how they utilize their time, right? Because if we've ended up in this material world and everything that we accumulate in our lifetime, all the money, car, house, everything, children, whatever, and then gradually, you know, I'm 70 years old now, and I'm definitely starting to feel like I'm deteriorating, and it gradually just starts to feel like you're on the way out, and it's amazing how quickly time goes when you get to this age. You know, there's a joke that just like the toilet paper on the roll, when it gets near the end, it goes faster and faster, right? So it's when life gets near the end, it just goes faster and faster, like that. So the material nature is warning us. It's actually giving us a good warning. For those of us that have survived so far, the material nature is constantly warning us. You got to figure out how to get out of my clutches. Don't just surrender to death and have it happen all over again. I mean, how many people want to be born as a baby, growing up and going to high school and getting, you know, pushed around in high school or doing the pushing in high school or whatever, you know? Who wants to go through all that stuff? And learn everything and then, you know, try to get married and then, you know, get another house and everything and then just die again, you know? And that's if you're lucky to take a human form of life, right? How many of us are going to be lucky to take a human form of life? I mean, I think amongst the devotees, we're all, because even a little devotional service saves one from the greatest fear, which is going back into animal species. So we are safe. But we can also help others to become safe. Anybody who touches the internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, comes in contact with the internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, actually gets a little bit of that glimpse. And it's described, Prabhupada described that it's actually even a little, even if one just touches the book, you know, when we're out on Sankirtan, if we just put a book in somebody's hand, and they don't take it, but they look at it and then give it back. Just that touching has saved them from taking an animal birth, because they've actually made a little bit of advancement in devotional service. So that's an important thing, you know. It's like when we go out, we don't realize how beneficial being a devotee is for the entire planet. I mean, when we're chanting Hare Krishna, the Hare Krishna doesn't just stay in this room. It is a completely transcendental sound vibration. So it's not limited by walls or by the atmosphere. You know, they say that there is no sound in space because there's nothing to transmit the sound vibration, right? But actually, it's a transcendental sound vibration, so it travels through space. So it goes to every planet in the universe, even just when we're chanting our japa. So every single person in the universe is actually getting benefit from us just sitting here going, Hare Krishna, Krishna,
Krishna Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
And they don't even know that, you know, we're doing this. And it is, so the internal energy of the Supreme Personality of God has no time. And it enables the rebellious souls who are there from the spiritual sky, who have to end up coming to the material sky because they've turned their back on Krishna, and they choose to want to forget Krishna. I made this material world. You can go and you can try to enjoy and see what you can come up with. And, you know, there are a few good karma cases. I would say practically everybody in this room is a good karma case. Because, for one thing, you're devotees, but even just everybody in Toronto, you know, all the human beings that are here. But there are so many spirit souls who are not good karma cases and are suffering greatly. People who don't know about Krishna and are experiencing huge losses in their life. I mean, everybody experiences a loss. Because if you're born, at some point your parents are going to die, or you're going to die and your parents are going to suffer that loss. So there's all these losses that are happening constantly to the living entity. And each one of those is the material nature going, hey, wake up, hey, wake up. So we need to wake up, and we need to be able to go out there and give that awakening to others as well. So that is why this is the Sankirtan movement. So we are actually giving people a chance to touch the internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead when they touch a book. And that actually is just a momentary touch of the spiritual internal energy, which is not under the influence of time. So for just a second, these people are actually completely outside of the influence of the material nature. Just like we've all been on Harinam probably, and some people come up and they start dancing with us and everything, and they really, some people really become ecstatic. And you can see they're just enjoying and like anything, because they're immediately out of the influence of eternal time. Immediately. Just by chanting the holy name. Prabhupada says in many purports that if one just chants the holy name, immediately one is transferred to the spiritual realm. Now, do we realize that we're transferred to the spiritual realm? No. That takes a little while for our consciousness to become cleansed, for our spiritual vision to become developed. But by constant practice, our spiritual development will happen. It's just like in the, everybody, as you get older, your eyes get weaker. A lot of times people get cataracts. And they have an operation sometimes, you know, just before they have the operation, sometimes they can barely see. You know, they just see very slight forms. But as soon as the cataract is put in, all of a sudden they can see us. Within a day or two, they're walking around going, wow, this is amazing, I can see again, you know. So the purpose of the spiritual master is, we say it every day almost, Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militantena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master forced open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So the spiritual master is like that cataract surgeon. He's giving, but he's not just giving material vision, he's giving the spiritual vision. And giving that, by engaging us in devotional service, we are actually becoming more and more absorbed into the internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and becoming less under the influence of time. So Srila Prabhupada was a perfect example of how somebody who was completely surrendered to the Supreme Person was completely outside of the influence of time. Shruti Kirti and Hari Sori, I've talked to them on a number of occasions, and I even, one time they were standing together in Mayapur, and I went up to them and I said, you know, here's so many years of serving Srila Prabhupada, and I just started thinking, how was it sort of keeping up with Srila Prabhupada all the time? And they said, that's why most of his servants only lasted a couple of years. If that. I mean, 2 years was a long time to be with Srila Prabhupada, because Prabhupada was just moving at such a pace. You know, he was constantly on the go. And he would travel, sometimes on an overnight flight, he wouldn't have slept the day before. He had a busy day before with meeting people and everything and helping the devotees. And then he would get on a flight, fly to another center, and they would greet him and everything, and he would come in for Guru Puja, give Bhagavatam class, and just go right into his day and start meeting people and everything, and not sleep until 11 o'clock that night. The devotees were like, Hari, sorry, and they were all like, I gotta take rest, And so it was a very difficult thing to keep up with Srila Prabhupada, because Prabhupada was definitely not under the influence of time. And that was probably the thing, that's not being under the influence of time allowed Srila Prabhupada to actually do what he did, which was spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, translate Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, write a whole bunch of small books, and answer so many letters, consult with so many devotees, meet so many people, and just constantly on the go. Because Prabhupada was free from the influence of eternal time. He was completely surrendered. And he only took rest a couple of hours a day because he knew that the material body needs, it's like if you're in a car. You may be able to step out of the car and keep going once the car's run out of gas. But when the car's run out of gas, you gotta fill it up, right? So Prabhupada was keeping going, but he realized every once in a while, you gotta put some gas in the car. You gotta give it some rest and give it some prasadam, something like that, to take care of it. But it was Prabhupada's ability to just be a completely surrendered soul that saved us, that saved all of us. And I believe that we really need to, we have to pay back that debt. Through our, many of us have different gurus, but Prabhupada said guru is one, right? Because it doesn't mean that any of the gurus in ISKCON are saying anything different than what Srila Prabhupada said. They all say exactly the same thing, or they should. I mean, I don't think there is any, I can't think of anyone who isn't, but I mean, one who hears from Prabhupada then just has to repeat what Prabhupada said. And so these gurus are also instructing how to engage in devotional service, how to spread Krishna consciousness, how to worship the deity, how to chant 16 rounds, how to cleanse your mind, how to become really absorbed in your japa, like that. All these things are being given, were originally given by Prabhupada, and they're also being, somewhat expanded a little bit. We have the, Sachinandan Swami Harinam retreats, and Mahatma Prabhu has Harinam retreats and like that. So, and there's a lot of really good understanding of how to apply oneself to chanting Hare Krishna in these retreats. So, but they're not saying anything different than what Srila Prabhupada said. They're just kind of expanding it a little bit and making it a little easier for us to understand and to take up like that. So the material nature is the place where all the spirit souls are going. Now, the thing is, it's not like the material nature is ever completely wrapped up. The material nature is always there, because there are always spirit souls that are in need of correction, who have turned their back on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the material nature is always there, and there's a constant movement of some souls who are practicing bhakti and attain the mercy of Krishna and get out of the material nature, and there's others who are in the spiritual sky and sometimes go, you know what, I want to go on my own, I want to rebel. And so they're the ones coming to the material nature. And so, it's just happening on such a grand scale that Mahavishnu is lying in the causal ocean, and he is the reservoir of all these spirit souls. They all, at the total annihilation at the end of sort of creation. Everybody, all the universes collapse into Mahavishnu, and all the spirit souls reside there for some time. And then the creation expands again and comes out and starts taking place and gives the opportunity for the spirit souls to try to lord it over. I mean, when you look around, everybody in the material world is just trying to be the best at something, right? I mean, everybody's thinking, Prabhupada used the term, every pauper is proud of his penny. So, you know, even though somebody may be a poor man, I've got a penny, and that man doesn't. So, in that way, everybody is proud of what little bit, you know, little thing they have. But they're thinking that that pride is the original fall, right? We're thinking that we can be as good as Bhagavan. He has all opulence. And the living entities are thinking, I want to be all opulent. And so Krishna says, all right, you can go to the material nature and try to be all opulent. And some people end up being quite opulent, but not in everything. You know, and not all of the opulence. I mean, some people are very rich, like Elon Musk and, you know, the Apple guys and Microsoft. You know, they're all super rich, but they don't have all the wealth, whereas Krishna has all the wealth. And there's men who go to the gym, you know, and they're pumping iron and everything, and they're getting really strong. And even Hiranyakashipu, you know, he stood for so long and performed so many austerities to become really strong and to get the benediction, to try to get the benediction to become immortal. And, but even he couldn't do that. He couldn't get that blessing of being immortal. And so, in this way, the living entities are just going after all the, and even like this Theosophical Society, I mean, there's so many books in there. And some people go in there and they're probably reading and trying to find out, you know, what is life about, or you know, just, I want more knowledge, more knowledge, more knowledge. Or people are going to universities, they want more knowledge, you know, they get their PhD. In English, there's a phrase, piled higher and deeper. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but you know what BS is? You know, don't give me any BS, you know, bull crap. And PhD means piled higher and deeper. So they're just piling it higher and deeper. And yet it's crap. It has nothing to do with helping them get out of the material nature. They're stuck. But they're thinking that if I just get a little bit more knowledge, if I can just figure it out, then I can, you know, lord it over this material nature somehow. But their lives are too short also, right? It's just, we have a very, very short lifespan in Kali Yuga. And by the time they're getting a little bit of knowledge, then poof, it disappears. And now they've created AI, and it was a professor at the University of Toronto who was one of the developers of AI. And he actually said, oh boy, this is the most dangerous thing that the human race has ever made, because it will destroy the human race. In the sense that there will be mass unemployment, because everything will be able to be done by computer and machines. And there will be, you know, it's already happened. My daughter, she was a coder, right? And now coding is all done by AI, practically. A lot of coders are losing their business. You know, there's no jobs for coders anymore. And it used to be a really good job. You know, you could get paid $80,000 to $100,000 a year, and now it's disappeared like that. So in this way, you know, people are trying to go after all these things to lord it over the material nature, but time keeps getting in the way. That, you know, 100-year lifespan is just not long enough to really accomplish anything. And even in previous yugas, of course, in previous yugas, most of the population understood that we have to function in harmony with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in Kali Yuga, that's where everything becomes completely topsy-turvy and everybody just, oh, there is no God, and it's just for us to enjoy and just try to do everything we can. And it's such, I mean, I have a friend of mine who's a vegan and a really good person and everything, but he's an atheist. And he has no desire, like if I approach him with a book or anything, not interested. And it's just like, you know, so what is life? And he said, well, it's just a bunch of chemicals. So why are you vegan? Well, because I think that, you know, being vegan is good for the animals. Well, why do you care about the animals if they're just a bunch of chemicals? I mean, would you destroy this table? Well, but that doesn't have any consciousness. Oh, and there is something called consciousness, right? But a lot of them just say, yeah, but it's a combination of matter also. But it's very valuable. Why is it valuable if it's just a combination of matter? Who cares, right? So people could just start going around shooting and killing each other and just trying to grab as much as they possibly can for themselves under that philosophy. I mean, if everybody on the planet adhered to that philosophy, how hellish would it be? And that's what happens at the end of Kali Yuga, right? Everybody's about 1.5 feet tall, and they're running around just killing and eating each other. That's the end of the description of Kali Yuga, pretty much. So it's really important that we understand how to get time on our side. And how do we do that? By tapping into the internal energy as much as possible. So when we're chanting Hare Krishna, we are tapping into the material, to the internal energy. And the more that we absorb our consciousness in the chanting, understanding that the name of Krishna and Krishna are non-different, and that putting those names together, that is, I was sort of meditating on this the other day. This may sound speculative to some people, but it seemed to make sense, and it seems to work, actually. You know, the gopis are constantly interested in helping Radha and Krishna come together, right? So when we say Hare Krishna, what are we doing? We're putting Radha and Krishna together. So we're actually functioning in that perfect thing, and because we're singing it, putting them together and singing it, what happens? It's a dance, transcendental dance. And even if you're just chanting japa, you're still putting them together, and you're absorbing them into your heart. And really, Prabhupada describes that we should try to establish an altar in our heart and establish the holy name on that altar. And in that way, we become fully absorbed in being in the internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And being in that internal energy, then, in the same way that Prabhupada touched so many souls, so many people said that when Prabhupada looked at them, it was like he was looking right through them. I mean, on the Siddhanta memory tapes, there are so many instances of devotees saying that. When I met Prabhupada looked at me and it looked like he was looking right through me, right to my soul. Prabhupada knew exactly who I was and, you know, what I wanted, all my desires and my shortcomings and everything. Prabhupada could see it all. You know, it was almost like, I think one devotee even described it as almost being like naked, you know, because Prabhupada had that vision, that spiritual vision. And so we also can have that spiritual vision. It is available to all of us. And it really just requires that we absorb ourselves in the activities of the internal energy, which is to glorify the holy name and to just render service. And render service to devotees. If the other devotees are all engaged in trying to be in the internal energy, then if we serve another devotee and help them, then that's also putting us in the internal energy as well. So it's not that, you know, we just try to work on ourselves. No, we try to really help everybody. It's described that a devotee is one who picks everybody else up and pushes them up. And Prabhupada was doing that all the time. He was just lifting everybody and pulling them up. And we can also become Prabhupada-like by following in his footsteps. Not that we're going to imitate Prabhupada. It's not that necessarily we'll end up sleeping only 2 hours a day. I mean, Prabhupada was a very, very special soul. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, it's described that when Lord Chaitanya says that I will send my Senapati Bhakta. Senapati means the warrior, general. And he will come and spread the holy name all over the world. So that is Srila Prabhupada. There's no doubt that that's Srila Prabhupada. And he did say, in every town and village of the world, my holy name will be heard. And Prabhupada, took it everywhere, almost everywhere. I mean, there's still a few towns and villages where, that holy name hasn't been heard. So we've still got some work to do. That's the wonderful thing. There's always more work to do for Krishna. It's not that we can just sort of sit back and go, oh, it's all done. It's not like that. No. We have to also take part. And when we do that, then we will find that we actually will be in the internal energy and time will be on our side. No longer will time be a hindrance to us. That because we're always, I don't know about you, but I mean, most of you are either you look on your phone or you watch and you're always looking at the time. Am I going to be late? Am I going to be on time? Am I doing this fast enough? Am I going to make sure that this is done, by the deadline, like that. And so time is constantly harassing us. But when you become a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was not harassed. Prabhupada was just peaceful all the time. All the time. Even sometimes when Srila Prabhupada, it was very, very rare, but there were instances where Prabhupada got upset with the devotees. One time, when one sannyasi fell down, and some of the other sannyasis and everybody sort of talked all about it and spread the rumor all sort of throughout ISKCON. Prabhupada got really upset with those sannyasis because he said, now, how's he going to come back? You've ruined it for him. He won't be able to come back without feeling horrible amongst everybody. So Prabhupada was upset with that. But, being upset was just to show us that what we did was really, really wrong and needed to be corrected and to understand the seriousness of it. But Prabhupada himself would sometimes, you hear from Harisari and Shyamasundar and some of Prabhupada's secretaries, Prabhupada would sometimes correct them very strongly. And it was interesting, Prabhupada knew exactly how to correct everybody according to what they could receive. So if Prabhupada felt that somebody was very fragile, Prabhupada would treat them in a very fragile way. But if somebody was a little seasoned devotee, then Prabhupada would sometimes get really heavy. But within seconds, Harisari and Shrutakirti both told me that Prabhupada would sometimes come down really heavy, and then within seconds he'd be like, oh, how's everything? He just because it's, okay, I've told you what's wrong, you do it, that's fine, it's over. No need to, keep harping on it. So we have to try to get out of the influence of material time, of eternal time, and get under the influence of the internal energy, and actually start to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then we'll be happy. We will also be able to make everybody else happy, and we'll all go back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for the lecture. Just want to ask you, how did you come to Krishna consciousness? Can you tell us a start of your story?
It's I have a short version and a long version. How much time do we have? We still have
We have time.
We have time, yeah.
Okay. I mean, throughout my grandfather died, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and I always wondered what death was about. And my father was Roman Catholic, Polish Roman Catholic. Like, and he came from Poland. I was the only one in my family born in Canada, and he said, "Oh no, we don't talk about that." I'm like, it's going to happen, isn't it? I mean, shouldn't we know a little bit more about it? No. It's like, okay, weird. Even at 8 or 9 years old, I kind of thought that was weird. So, and I used to read the epistle and everything at church. And I remember one time there was an epistle that said, one should love God more than one's father, more than one's mother, more than one's children, more than one's brothers and sisters. You know, love for God is like the highest. And I was thinking, wow, now that's something that, and it took me quite a while, you know, of going through catechism and everything else to finally hear that. And so then I started thinking, I've got to figure out how to love God. I mean, I was still engaging in a lot of nonsense. You know, and when I read that, I was probably about 16 years old, and I was in the midst of, you know, going out on the weekend and getting drunk and, you know, and whatever. And, but I remember seeing the devotees, and the first time I saw devotees, I was at McGill University in 1971, in the fall of 1971. And I saw the devotees on campus, and they were doing kirtan. But unlike a lot of devotees who, when they first saw the kirtan, they were immediately attracted by the holy name, I was not. I thought, crazy, you know, I thought these guys are nuts. And you know, from then on, like at McGill University, the temple was just a block away. And where I lived, I had to walk where a lot of the devotees would walk over to the campus. So I would often see devotees on the sidewalk, and I'd cross the street to avoid them, you know. And yet I was trying to read books on autobiography of the yogi and Be Here Now and, you know, things like that. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I was reading all these books, but I just thought the devotees had no knowledge, no understanding. They were just crazy. So Krishna arranged, I was going to work out in Banff one summer, but I went all the way out to Vancouver and over to Vancouver Island, and I was visiting a friend, and the friend, we were going through downtown, and we went into a head shop, and there was a poster, like they sold spiritual sky incense, and they also had a poster of the Maha Mantra. And I remember reading the Maha Mantra, and oh, so that's what the Hare Krishnas are chanting. And I read it a couple of times, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So then that evening, we went back to their place, and his parents were there, and we had dinner together, and they were discussing, what do you want to do with your life? And I was saying, well, I would like to find out what life's all about and try to help people and, you know, make the world a better place. And they said, oh, that sounds very good, but you know what? You'll probably just get eaten up by the commercial machine and spit out at the end of your life. And I was like, whoa, that is not where I want my life to go. And that just sort of, I remember walking away from the dinner table, because we talked for quite a long time. So it was about 11 o'clock at night, and we went to sleep. I was sleeping. Oh, before I went to sleep, I just started going, oh God, I just want to know. I just want to know. I just want to know. Please, I just want to know the truth. What is it? What is it? What is life all about? Why? And I just want to know. And I started crying. And honestly, for about half an hour, I was crying so much my pillow was soaked with tears. And I was just like crying and crying and crying. The next day, I was going from there to Vancouver, and I was in Victoria, and I took a train up to Nanaimo, and I was waiting for the ferry. I was sitting in a park, and all of a sudden this guy comes over and says, hey, you want to buy some acid? And I said, no. But I have some grass, you know, do you want to toke up? And he was like, yeah, sure. So we started toking up, and then we ended up, he only had one hit of acid left, so we ended up splitting it, which was probably a good thing, because it was my first time doing acid. But it was, and then we're sitting there, we're, you know, getting just comfortably stoned, and then there was a bumblebee flying around from flower to flower. And he said, you see that bumblebee? He got that life from desires from a previous lifetime. I looked at him like, wow, where'd you come from? and then he started telling me all about the philosophy, but he didn't mention Krishna. It's like Krishna just knew to send me this guy who's not going to talk about Krishna for the first few hours. And we talked for like 2.5 hours, and he never mentioned Krishna, which is really pretty amazing when you think about it. You know, if you're talking to somebody, how many of us have talked for a long time without even saying the name Krishna, right? Hardly. But he did that. And it was just Krishna's arrangement. And then we got on the ferry, because he was also waiting for the same ferry. We got on the ferry, and I guess maybe he thought I was, you know, if I heard the name Krishna, I wasn't going to jump off the boat or anything. So he said the name Krishna, and I went, wow, wait a minute, you mean those guys with the shaved heads and the robes, they know all this stuff? You know, reincarnation and transmigration and karma and everything. And I was like, oh my goodness. I always thought they were crazy and they didn't know anything. And he's like, oh no, they have all kinds of books. In fact, when we get off the ferry in Vancouver, I'll take you to my place. So we got off the ferry in Vancouver, he took me to his place. And it was quite interesting, we got to Vancouver and we walked through, and it's a very nice part of town now, but in those days it was pretty dilapidated. And we walked into the house, and it was just a hippie house, right? So there was a couple, you know, making out on the couch, and we walked upstairs, there's a guy in the shower, and there's no shower curtain or anything, you know? It's like there's not even a door on the bathroom. This is weird. And then we got to a staircase going up to the highest floor, and there was a big padlock on the door, so we went up the stairs, he unlocked the door and walked in, and the inside was all painted sort of pink and pastel blue. In the old days, the temples were all painted like that, this sort of pastel, you know, light blue and light pink and light yellow. And so it was painted like that. His bed was perfectly made. His, you know, he had, I mean, at that time, the books only went up to 3rd Canto, Part 1. And so I remember seeing the book, and he showed me the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I remember looking through it, and I was just thinking, wow, I wish I wasn't so stoned, I'd be able to actually understand this, right? And, but I completely felt after that I'm going to one day become a devotee. And I remember he had to go, we stayed in his place for about an hour, and then he had to go somewhere, and I had to go to where I was staying. And we parted ways, and I hadn't even found out his name. And I said, what's your name? As he's walking away, like we'd both gotten about 20 feet apart. And I turned around and I said, what's your name? And he goes, it doesn't matter. And I said, no man, you've changed my life. What is your name? And he goes, okay, my name is John Fogarty. So I went back, and over the next year, I gradually became a devotee. And then I remember Bahudak, who was one of the old temple presidents in Vancouver, he came to the Toronto temple for Rath Yatra, and I asked him, I said, do you know a devotee named John Fogarty? And he goes, oh yeah, we know him. And yeah, he kind of comes and goes, you know, and I said, oh, well, if you see him, say hi. And so I said, okay. And so then about 2 years later, I met Bahudak again, and he said, oh, John actually got initiated, and he's doing quite well, and everything. And then about a year later, he came back and said, oh, he's kind of gone out again. And and then I didn't hear anything about him for many years. And it was 2003, I think it was. We had a Canadian leaders meeting out in Sharanagi, and in Vancouver actually. And I had asked the devotees in Vancouver if anybody knew, this, and I found out his initiated name. His initiated name was Vrajabhaka, and so I said, "Do you ever see Vrajabhaka?" And they said, "Oh, he comes once in a while for a festival or something." And I thought, okay, well, probably won't see him. So Bhakti Marg Swami was having everybody get up and give a little talk about what they. So I was, representing a temple, and so I got up and everybody had like 3 minutes, and I stood up in front of everybody, and I looked over the crowd, and I see this one guy, and his face looks familiar, and I go, "John?" And, I just kind of mouthed it, and he goes, "Chris." Because I'm right in the middle of my thing, and he goes, "Okay," and everybody in the audience is like, "What's that all about?" So I finished my 2 or 3 minute spiel, and I walked over to him, and I go, "John Vrajabhaka," and he goes, "Yeah," and he's hugging me, and he's going, he was saying to me, "I was praying you'd become a good devotee," and I was hugging him, and I was saying, "I'm still praying I'll become a good devotee." And we talked for the whole Sunday feast, and then I helped him get on the bus and everything and go back. He was living on the Gulf Islands, between Vancouver and Victoria. So just like that, and that was 30 years later, because I met him in 1973, and this was 2003, so 30 years later, I met him, and I got to thank him, because I never saw him again, and he's passed away now. So, but it was, so that's kind of the story.
That's a nice story. Thank you very much, Maharaj. What about your relationship with Srila Prabhupada? Have you met in,
When I joined in Ottawa, they had on the wall, they had many pictures of Srila Prabhupada. And even in the pictures, I should have realized, because the devotees all look tall compared to Srila Prabhupada, but for some reason, in those days, we would get one 90-minute cassette tape. Remember cassette tapes? I don't know if many of you may be too young to remember cassette tapes, but we would have this 90-minute cassette tape, and on one side it would have like a Bhagavad Gita class, and then it would have like a little bit of a room conversation, and on the other side it would have a Srimad Bhagavatam class, and then it would have a little bit of a morning walk. And so just hearing Prabhupada's voice and the way Prabhupada spoke of Krishna consciousness was so strong and so forceful and so realized that and I've heard this from other devotees too, they all thought, and I did too, that Prabhupada was going to be huge. And so it was really when, after 3 months of being in the Ottawa temple, we went down to New Vrindavan. Bhakti Raghava Swami, you know Bhakti Raghava Swami? Bhakti Raghava Swami and I joined pretty much together. He joined in on March 1st, and I joined on April 1st, or April 9th of 1974. So we joined almost together. And then we went down to New Vrindavan, and so 3 months after, in July, we got initiated. And Prabhupada was there. We went down to New Vrindavan because Prabhupada was there. And the first time I saw Prabhupada, he was coming along the road, and it was so different because there wasn't the palace, there wasn't the palace lodge, there wasn't that whole area down there was just forest and some fields. And so but Prabhupada had been out on a walk, and he came, and the road kind of went like this, and we were on one side, and you could see the devotees walking this way, and then it kind of went like that. So the dandas, you could see the dandas going up and down as they were coming towards us, and then all of a sudden you saw heads, and where's Prabhupada? And because Prabhupada was so short, it took a little while before his head actually appeared. And so we were a little like taken aback. Oh, Prabhupada's so small. But, then we all went into the temple room and Prabhupada gave Bhagavatam class. And again, that forceful, strong preaching was there. And just amazing, And yeah, we there were a lot of, it was, I didn't really ever get a chance to talk directly to Srila Prabhupada. I mean, Prabhupada in New Vrindavan handed me my beads, and I still happen to have the exact same beads inside here that Prabhupada gave me. And there were 35 devotees getting initiated in that initiation. And my last name begins with a Z, Zyhovsky. So it was the last name, I think, because I think they put them in alphabetical order. And I was one of the very last devotees to get asked to go up. And so Prabhupada didn't even ask me the 4 regulative principles. I offered my obeisances, and he just put out the beads, and he says, your name is Krishna. Actually, that's an interesting story. Prabhupada, he put out the beads, and he said, your name is Krishna Das Das. But I don't know how many of you had trouble understanding Prabhupada when you first heard his tapes. It took a little while to kind of get Prabhupada's English. And so I was still in that phase, and I had no idea what Prabhupada had said. I had remembered the sound vibration, but I still couldn't translate it in my brain. It was just like, no, it's not coming. So I went to Jagadish, who was our GBC, and I asked him, so I got my beads from Prabhupada, but I couldn't understand what Prabhupada said, so I still don't know what my name is. And he said, he looked it up in the book. He had the book that Prabhupada had gone over all the initiates the night before and written out their names beside their karmi name and then the devotee name. And he said, oh, your name is Krishna Das Kaviraj Das. And I said, and then it dawned on me when he said that, the sound vibration that Prabhupada said was Krishna Das Das. So I asked him, I said, so should I go by Krishna Das Das or Krishna Das Kaviraj Das? And Jagadish said, it's in the book as Krishna Das Kaviraj. Prabhupada wanted you to be Krishna Das Kaviraj, so go by Krishna Das Kaviraj. And then the next time I saw Prabhupada was in Philadelphia in 1975. And then that was in July of 75, June or July of 75. And I can remember, there's all these stories of when Prabhupada's coming and people are painting Prabhupada's house, and it was one of those stories. They had just acquired the house across the street from the temple. They just bought it like about 3 days before, and the people had just moved out. And so they, the kitchen was a mess. The whole house was, and so we arrived the day before Prabhupada was going to arrive. And we had driven the whole way the night before, and we were pretty tired. They just said, you're gonna sleep for 2 hours and then we need you in the house. And we went into the house, we went into the kitchen, we threw all the appliances out the back door, we ripped up the floor, we ripped, all the cabinets and everything, just threw everything in the backyard. And we went upstairs, we did the same thing, we ripped up a lot of floors, we laid down linoleum, we put everything in the kitchen. I mean, I was up into one of the bedrooms, but there were devotees working in the kitchens and doing all that stuff. And it was just amazing how much, in 24 hours, we completely renovated that house. But just as Prabhupada was arriving and he was getting out of the car, I was still looking down because the temple was on the other side of the street. I was painting the windowsill. And I was looking out the window and Prabhupada was getting out of the car. So, those stories are very true. And Prabhupada was always saying, why is it everywhere I go it smells like fresh paint? But yeah, Prabhupada was you know, I never wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada, and I never really directly asked him a question, but I always felt that if I had to, I could have written to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would have answered. I always felt that. But I was just like, Prabhupada is running an entire movement. He's working on his books and everything. And the last thing he needs is some little guy going, what's the meaning of life, Srila Prabhupada? Like that. So I just didn't bother him. And I think that's actually most of the gurus in the movement now even have not had, you know, Bhakti Marg Swami had the same experience that I did pretty much. He may have had maybe a little bit more, but I don't think so. Oh, he was on a morning walk with Prabhupada in Toronto. Interestingly, when Prabhupada came to Toronto, I was there, and we had brought the deities from the Ottawa temple. We brought Gaur Nitai down to the Toronto temple so that all the devotees could come to see Prabhupada. And I remember Krishna Kata Prabhu he would make the chapatis every morning for all the devotees. And he said, if you come, he was trying to get somebody to come and help make the chapatis in the morning. So he came up to myself and Lakshminath. I don't know if anybody knows Lakshminath in Montreal temple. Anyway, he got myself and Lakshminath to go down to the kitchen and help with chapatis. And so we made the chapatis. And he said, if you come and help today, you know, you'll get to go on the morning walk tomorrow. So, okay, great. You know, we went down and then the next day he said the same thing, you know. If you and then the last day he asked us again. He didn't, because he knew that now we knew how to make chapatis. I mean, that he had seen we could do it on our own. So he went on the morning walk and left us making the chapatis. But, you know, and we always talk about how it's better to serve the body than the bapu. So I just figured, you know what? I'm serving Prabhupada here in the kitchen. I don't need to be out there hearing Prabhupada in the morning walk. It's probably going to be taped anyway. I'll be able to hear it later. So no worries. Yeah. And but I remember I dressed the deities in the Gaur Nitai deities, the Ottawa Gaur Nitai deities, on the altar when Prabhupada, and I remember I was doing the artik. And at that time, the 7 o'clock artik in the Toronto temple always had 3 pujaris, one for each altar. And so I was the Gaur Nitai pujari, and Prabhupada came in from his morning walk, and he spent a long time looking at Gaur Nitai, like much longer than Radha Gopinath and Jagannath. At least on that morning, I remember he was really, it was kind of interesting. I mean, not that I'm any great pujari or anything, I mean, I wasn't trying to imply that, but just that Prabhupada had a way of reciprocating with devotees. Just little things sometimes that Prabhupada would do, you would understand that Prabhupada appreciated what you were doing. There was one morning in Mayapur in 1976. This is actually an example of when chanting japa could almost be Maya. And some of you may have heard this story before, but Lakshminath Prabhu and I were sitting, you know, when you go up towards Prabhupada's room, you go up to the first floor and then you go up to the next floor in Prabhupada's room. And so we had gone up and we were sitting on that was the only building in Mayapur at the time in 1976. There was that building and the buildings where all the stores are now, that's where we were sleeping in where all those stores are. They weren't stores, they were just places for devotees to. We just put out a mat and slept on the cement, like a straw mat, about that thick, and slept on the cement. And so anyway, we were sitting on this bench, and there was one devotee, the steps were going up to Prabhupada's room, there's one devotee sitting at the end of the bench, and Lakshminath Prabhu and I are sitting here, and suddenly a devotee comes running down and says, Prabhupada's out on the morning walk. And the devotee who was supposed to help me clean Prabhupada's room didn't show up. And he asked the devotee at the end, can you come and help? And the Prabhu answered, sorry, I have to chant my rounds. And those days in Mayapur, there was nothing to do. You know, there was no service because it was all taken care of by everybody who lived in Mayapur. And I mean, there were only a few devotees. Like Mayapur probably had 40 or 50 devotees actually living there all year round. It was really pretty small. and so, you know, Lakshminatha and I were just like, yeah, for sure. And we jumped up and ran upstairs, and we got to make Prabhupada's bed, and we, you know, we took the sheets off of Prabhupada. Prabhupada had slept in the bed, so where his feet were on the bed, and we were able to, you know, touch our head onto the sheet where Prabhupada's feet were, and then we swept the whole room, and we got a whole dust bin, you know, and we took it out on the balcony, and we held it over our heads. Yeah, it was real mercy, I'll tell you. And yeah, it was ecstatic. And then actually, I think it was just a couple of mornings later. In those days, there was no bottled water, and in Mayapur, you just would drink whatever came out of the taps, and most of it just was pumped out of the ground, and most of the groundwater around there is pretty contaminated, and so everybody was getting sick, right? But they said that if you drink Ganga water, you won't get sick. So they had told us before we went to Mayapur, bring a canteen, you know, to carry water. So I had a canteen, and every morning I would go down to the Ganga, and the Ganga was a little farther away. You know, now it's actually, and it was predicted by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, or even Bhakti Thakur, that the Ganga would actually come over close to where the Mayapur temple was, and now it's done that. Before, you know, there's that line of palm trees way over on the other side of the flat ground. There's like a line, that used to be the bank. The far bank of the Ganga, so you had to walk like almost a mile to get to the Ganga. But I would go and I'd get Ganges water, and I was not getting sick. I was actually doing quite well. So one morning, Prabhupada's sitting in his car at the bottom of the steps of the Lotus building, and there's a kirtan going on, and Lakshminath Prabhu and I are standing right beside the ambassador car, and Prabhupada's sitting in the back seat, and he's looking like right up at us like this, and we're chanting Jaya Prabhupada and Hare Krishna and everything, and Prabhupada's, you know, enjoying the kirtan, and they're just about to drive away, and they stop, and somebody jumps out of the car and says, "We don't have Prabhupada's sweater." So somebody runs up, gets Prabhupada's sweater, comes running down. He puts it in gear, and then all of a sudden they put it out of gear. Hari Sori was the one, and he jumps out again, and he goes, "We don't have Prabhupada's cane." So somebody runs up, gets Prabhupada's cane, comes running down. They put it in gear, they're about to drive away again. All of a sudden they stop, they jump out, and Hari Sori said, "We don't have any water." And I had my full canteen with Ganga water in it. I just took it off and I said, "You can take mine." And he just grabbed it and put it in the car, and as they drove off, Prabhupada just looked up at me and went. It was so sweet, you know. In fact, I don't know if I should tell this one, because Purnamasi has a water story as well, but I think I might tell it just because it goes so well together. She tells it a little better than I do, but I will tell it anyway. It was in the Gerrard Street Temple, which was just a small house. The temple room was only about half the width of this room, and probably the actual temple room, the deity, where the deities were, was probably about 6 feet on the other side of that wall. But the temple room was only that big, and there were sometimes 50 or 60 devotees in that area, you know, just all crammed in. And so Prabhupada was coming, and she, when Prabhupada came in, well, Prabhupada wasn't, but as Prabhupada, they called from the airport to say that we've got Prabhupada, we're bringing him back. And so everybody was getting ready, and suddenly, just after a few minutes, quite a few minutes, when Prabhupada would have been getting very close, somebody said, "Prabhupada's water hasn't been changed." So Purnamasi ran and grabbed it from the side of the Asasan, took it over, took it into the kitchen and, wiped everything, rinsed it off and put fresh water in, and was coming back. And there was a hallway, the temple room was here, the kitchen was behind the deity house, and there was a hallway coming down this way. And Purnamasi was coming this way, and the door to the house was right here. So suddenly Prabhupada just came right in the door, and Purnamasi was just about to go in the temple room. She had the water, and she's like, so went down, and she was holding the water, with her head on the ground, holding the water up like this. And Prabhupada just walked in, and all the dandas and everything, and the temple room just filled right up. And she was standing there while everybody was going in, and all of a sudden, she realized Prabhupada doesn't have his water, so she tapped on the shoulder of one devotee, and so they passed it all in, and it got up to beside Prabhupada, and Prabhupada saw. Prabhupada gave his talk. Partway through the talk, Prabhupada took the water, and it was a little pitcher, and then he poured some in the glass, and then he took it. And Purnamasi was standing by the door of the temple room, and Purnamasi said he took the water, and Prabhupada didn't often drink right out of the cup. He would always do that pouring in the mouth. And so Prabhupada poured it into his mouth, and as he was pouring, he just looked right at Purnamasi, like, thank you for getting my water. So, Prabhupada did these little things that appreciated. There was another devotee named Urvashi. Just a few years ago, she passed away. She wasn't very old, and she was in quite good physical condition and everything, but she just suddenly had a stroke and gone. And she was out riding a bicycle on her brother's birthday, I think it was. I don't think it was her birthday, I think it was her brother's birthday. And she suddenly had a stroke and just down. But in the early days, she had become a devotee, and one time Urvashi had got her mother to come to the temple when Prabhupada was there. And Prabhupada spoke with her mother, and she really enjoyed speaking with Prabhupada. She really felt comforted that Urvashi was being well taken care of and well looked after, and it just reassured her very much. And so she went back, and there was a tree in her backyard that had guavas on it. This was in California. And so she made guava jam, and one time when Urvashi went to visit her mother, she wrapped up some guava jam and gave it to her and said, please give this to your spiritual master. So Urvashi took the jam, gave it to Srila Prabhupada, and she thought, that's the end of it. I won't hear anything about it. Prabhupada went away, and then, because she was a devotee in LA, I think it was, and so all of a sudden, I think she got a call from her mother, and her mother was saying, you won't believe this. She's like, what? I just got a letter from your spiritual master. And he said, thank you so much for this guava jam. I tasted it. It was wonderful. Thank you again, for, and thank you for allowing your daughter to be such a wonderful devotee, and, you being such a wonderful mother and everything. Prabhupada just knew how to, glorify people properly. And so, it was just, Prabhupada took the time to write a letter just about that little bit of jam. Pretty amazing. Prabhupada wrote so many letters when you think, and it wasn't, you actually had to write a letter. And many of the letters that we'd get from Prabhupada, because sometimes the temple president would get a letter, and it would actually be in Prabhupada's handwriting. But then his secretary started typing, and then it wasn't in his handwriting anymore. But it was, Prabhupada averaged about 4 to 5 letters every single day from 1965 until he passed away. If you put it over all that time, Prabhupada averaged about 4 or 5 letters every single day. mean, that's pretty incredible, along with everything else he's doing. I mean, now, if you ask somebody to write a letter, everybody's like, write a letter? Take a hike. I'm just going to send them an email, or a text, or
Text message.
yeah, Instagram.
Bye.
Yeah, right. Or just speak it. You just press a button and go, "Hey, boy." So, Prabhupada was very mindful of how to treat devotees, how to treat people. He was super polite with everybody that he met, because he wanted to encourage, he wanted to fan the spark. Prabhupada knew that here's a spirit soul who is floundering in the material world, who wants to enjoy, but they're thinking their enjoyment is in the material nature. And Prabhupada said, I need to fan the spark of devotional service to get that person to eventually take part in devotional service and get out. So Prabhupada just encouraged everybody. He really had that encouraging spirit. Nowadays, sometimes you hear, I would say that a lot of the temples now have developed a much more caring attitude. Devotee care has become a big thing, which is a really good thing, because there were times in the old days where, temple presidents would sometimes, it'd almost be like cracking the whip on devotees. They gotta get out on Sankirtan, and they'd drag them out of the room and, put a book bag on them and throw them out the door and stuff, But it didn't happen that often, but I mean, I've heard stories. So, but Prabhupada was not like that. He just encouraged. And whatever somebody could do, because everybody has different capabilities. So not everybody can be a wonderful book distributor. I mean, it is pretty easy, but, not everybody, just has the personality that, they're very introverted like that. And so but there's other avenues of devotional service, being a pujari, being a cook, writing, whatever. I mean, there's just, there's a lot of ways in which we can serve Krishna. Yeah. Any other questions or anything?
Mine's sort of a two-parter. The first part is there any connection that we can make with followers of, I guess, Abrahamic philosophies and religions? That we can, as you say with John Fogerty, that he was able to talk with you about God and philosophy, but without even saying Krishna's name.
Right.
But you understood, even though you say you come from Catholic Roman tradition, so.
Yeah. I mean, Roman Catholics, they say that I think the highest number of devotees, like Stilson Judah did a survey of devotees, but this was back in the early 80s, and he found at that time that the highest number were Roman Catholic before, because having Jesus on the crucifix and everything, Catholics are a little bit more okay with sort of a deity worship in a sense. And but it's true that there are, many Protestants and everything now are, we should know, love, and serve God, but some of them even have developed even a little bit of an impersonal understanding of God, that he's not some old man who sits up there, but he's the energy and, the divine light, and, and they actually even almost talk about that, and how to tap into that. I mean, Vaisheshika Prabhu, one of our main book distributors in our movement, he often talks about how we should get the ripened fruits. So some people are just ready, right? They know that I should know, love, and serve God with my whole heart, mind, and soul, which is what Jesus was saying. And basically what Abraham was saying as well. And so how do we actually get there? To actually develop love for God. You know, how many people love somebody that they've never even met? Now, that's an interesting thing, especially since at the beginning of this I said my marriage was arranged. And honestly, before Purnamasi and I got married, we had said maybe 10 words to each other. I mean, maybe a little bit more than that, but not a lot, you know. We had maybe had a couple of sit-downs where we were reading together, but we really had not, you know, met each other. And, you know, it wasn't based on sort of that lusty relationship, that sort of, because they say that the beginning of a relationship often in the material world is oxytocin actually kicks in, right? And oxytocin is a really powerful hormone that just drives a young person to think that this person is the one for me. And it just completely takes over, you know, it makes people go crazy almost, right? I mean, it has made people go crazy. So, but, you know, so how do you, but those people were developing that loving relationship by knowing the person, right? By, you know, getting to, you know, and of course, they get to know them, and then after a little while, sometimes certain things get revealed or they change. And so then there's a divorce or whatever. But if it's based on service to God, if one's relationship is really based on service to God, then it'll get you through all the hard times. And, you know, granted, Purnamasi and I have been married a long time, but she'd be the first to admit that, you know, we've had our rocky times, but we've gotten through it because it's based on service to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. And so those people who don't really have a clear view of who God is, like many of the Protestant religions, like in Catholicism, I never found that they were saying that Christ is God. I mean, he's the Son of God, and he's part of the Trinity, but he wasn't God the Father. He was actually a different person. So sort of simultaneously one and different, right? And so I never felt that, you know, that I had to necessarily, that Jesus was the one who was showing us how to love God, but he wasn't actually God himself, because he was always talking about God the Father in heaven. Like, you know, even when he was on the cross, he said, Father, into thine hands I commend my spirit. So there was definitely a difference between Jesus and God, right? I mean, if he was God, he would have just, hey, I can handle this. But he didn't. He was the servant of God, and he underwent all that torment in order to teach everybody how dedicated you have to be to actually love God. You got to be ready to lay down your life. And there have been devotees who have laid their. I mean, I read Salted Bread, you know, the book, right, about the devotees who died in prison in Russia, and they laid down their life for Krishna. You know, the guards just said, all you have to do is renounce Krishna, and we'll let you go. Renounce it all, and we'll let you go. And they didn't, and they just starved them. But, so, getting Catholics to understand that there is actually a Father in heaven who isn't just some old man, you know, because that's often the iconography that comes out of the sort of understanding of the scripture, but he's actually a beautiful 16-year-old youth who really wants to have this friendly, fun relationship with you. He's not just some big old guy, you know, and where everybody sits around and just strums harps. You know? It's not like that, you know. You're actually really engaging and having a great time with Krishna, you know. It's like the cowherd boys, you know. They're often, you know, throwing, you know, they'll grab Krishna's lunch from him, and you know, and then, you know, when Krishna comes to get it back, they'll throw it to another boy, and then Krishna has to go over there, and you know, they're, you know, teasing Krishna like that, you know. and they're just having a really good time. And that's the kind of relationship you can have with God. I mean, it seems really odd that the controller of everything actually becomes that intimate with his devotees. But that's the special nature of Krishna and his relationship with his devotees, that it is that intimate. And it just, everything else, the whole material nature and everything is just in the background. And it's just a small part of the spiritual sky. Everything else is, everybody's just having fun with Krishna. And Krishna expands himself to have fun with everybody. So it's not like, when you get to the spiritual world, it's like there's 3 trillion devotees and you're like, can I see Krishna? No, he expands to be with you and in a perfect relationship with you. And even his entourage and everything expands in order to accommodate everybody in all ways. So it's a perfect relationship. I don't know if that answered that, but
Yeah, if I may, I have a little extension of that.
sure.
I wanted to ask if you know, possibly, if there are any mentions of, how there are pastimes, but any mentions of the future about the incoming Torah, the Bible, and the Quran, and so on in
In the Srimad Bhagavatam?
the Vedas.
Not the Bible and the Quran, because those are Jesus. Prabhupada said that Jesus was a Shakti Dashavataar, which means that he was empowered by Krishna. And there are places in India where they say that Jesus of Nazareth was actually here. There are places in India. So he came to India and he learned bhakti. And he took that back with him to the Middle East. And he had to preach according to time, place, and circumstance. So he had to preach sort of sub-religious principles. Like, yes, know, love, and serve God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So he was teaching that, and many people now have kind of forgotten almost about the love of God, and they really just, Christianity has just become an altruistic movement, helping everybody. But that is just one part of it. You actually have to do it with this sense that we're actually loving God. Interestingly, I went to Loyola High School. It was a Catholic high school. And I just recently got a letter from the Alumni Association, and they were asking all the alumni to come and help serve a meal at a place where they said, and you can bring things for sandwiches. And they were saying, bring ham, bologna, and salami, which all 3 of those are practically the worst things that you can eat. In fact, it's funny because just the day before, I was reading an article on, because I used to be involved with the hospital for sick children. I was a respiratory therapist, so I read on WebMed and Medscape all the time. And they've just shown that eating processed red meat, like bologna and salami and ham, all those actually increases the risk of dementia. I mean, it's been previously shown that those definitely increase the risk of cancer, but it also really increases the risk of dementia. And yet, so you're asking me to, and I actually wrote them back. And I said, you're asking me to come and serve poison to these people? What's wrong with you? Please change the menu. And I hope they get it. But yeah, that's, But so those are sub-religious principles, the Quran and the Bible. They are extensions that came out of India, but it kind of became diluted a little bit, and actually over the years it's become very diluted. To the point where, they say to know, love, and serve God. Well, I want to know God. So tell me about it. It was Jesus. So you can read about the life of Jesus. No, Jesus is not God. Jesus is the Son of God. And he even said, we are all brothers and sisters. So, but he said, I realized it, and you have not. So, it's just like, well, so how is it that I'm going to know God if you can't tell me who God is? Whereas the Srimad Bhagavatam, I mean, it just gives so much information of how Krishna reciprocates with what his personality is like, all the qualities that he has, wonderful qualities, 64, amazing qualities. And he has them all in full, and he reciprocates with everybody perfectly. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Ye yatamam prapadyante tamstadaiva tataiva bhajamiham, that as they surrender unto me, I reciprocate accordingly. So Krishna reciprocates perfectly with everybody. And if we give our love to him, if we want to love him, Krishna will arrange that you meet somebody who will tell you who God is. He has lotus eyes. He has a threefold bending form. He plays the flute. He's known as Keshava, one who has fine hair. He has fine, long, black hair. And he's always wearing a flower garland and a tulsi garland. And he's just, and then we have the deity, which is actually Krishna. Because, there's a picture of Radhamadava over there on top of the piano. And Radhamadava are in Mayapur. Some people think that the deity form is just a material thing. But Srila Prabhupada said that all matter is Krishna. The external energy is just a manifestation of Krishna's energy. So he can appear as the deity in order to receive our devotion. So we can dress the deity and meditate on him and surrender our lives like that in that service. And it actually becomes a whole meditation, and it leads to one's perfection, where one can actually go and serve Krishna in the spiritual world. And Prabhupada compared it to like a mailbox. There's mailboxes that are authorized, on the corners, and if you put your letter in there, it's going to go away. But if I were to just make up a mailbox and put it out on the street and say, hey, put your letters in there, they'll get to wherever they want to go, it's not going to go anywhere, right? And in fact, anybody who does that is probably just going to take them out and dump them somewhere. So the deity is the authorized form of Krishna, and there's a whole understanding of how we accept the deity form, and how he comes into the deity and manifests. And there's stories, not just stories, they're histories, his stories, of deities actually walking and talking. Marble forms of the deity when they were really, there's a whole story that was just a drama done by Bhakti Mark Swami last summer, or a couple of summers ago, about the witness Gopal. And, the Brahmin, an elderly Brahmin and a young Brahmin were traveling all over, and the elderly Brahmin was pleased with the young Brahmin's service. And so he goes, the elderly Brahmin says, I'm going to give my daughter in marriage to you. But the young Brahmin was actually of a lower sort of caste of Brahmins. And the young Brahmin said, your family's never going to accept this. And he said, no, I've been very happy. And so the young Brahmin said, would you mind making that promise in front of the deity? So he said, okay, no problem. And he makes the promise in front of the deity. So they leave that deity and they go back to their home after a long, long period of pilgrimage. It's like a year or two or so that he's been gone. He comes back and he says, I was very happy with this young Gopal who helped me go all this place, not Gopal, but whatever, because Gopal's the name of the deity. And he says, and I've given my daughter in marriage, and the family freaks out. And so he said, so the young boy says, I knew this was going to happen, and it's like, I'm really not, I'm not attached, but he did promise in front of the deity, and I don't want his promise that he made in front of the deity to be broken. So I will go and I will ask the deity to come and bear witness. And everybody's like, if you can get Gopal to come here, yeah, right. Yeah, that's going to happen, you know. And so he went, and he goes in front of the deity, and he just says, you know, Gopal, this elderly Brahmin, he's very devout, and he made the promise to you, and now his promise will be broken unless you can come and bear witness. And so suddenly the deity says, what? And he goes, yeah, you're your elderly devotee who really loves you and cares for you and everything. He needs you to come and bear witness so that his promise is not broken. And the deity was like, but how's a deity going to walk all the way to that town? And the boy says to the deity, well, if you can talk, certainly you can walk. So the deity actually says, okay, I will follow you, and every day that we're traveling, you just cook a bit of rice and something else, I can't remember, but anyway, just cook and put it behind you, and I'll take it, and just don't turn around, and we'll get all the way back. And so, and as they were walking, the boy could constantly hear the jangle of the ankle bells that they put on the deity. And so once they got to the border of the town, all of a sudden the ankle bells stopped ringing. He was like, uh-oh. So he turns around, and Gopal's standing there behind him, and he says, go into the town. And so he goes into the town and says, Gopal has come, and everybody comes out, and I mean, it freaks everybody out, because this deity has just walked like 1,000 miles to come to this town, but to uphold the promise of his devotee. In fact, there's a whole story in the Mahabharata where Krishna, in the Battle of Kurukshetra, where the Pandavas were needing some help, and so they were Krishna basically, actually no, in the Bhagavad Gita it says, declare it boldly that my devotee will never be vanquished. And so you kind of wonder, well, why doesn't, I mean, Krishna's the one saying it, why doesn't he, you know, this is my declaration that my devotee will never be vanquished. So he tells his devotee, because Krishna says, I can sometimes under circumstances break my promise. And there have been interesting stories why Krishna has broken his promise for a higher cause, basically. But he says, I will never allow the promise of my devotee to be broken. And so he declares it boldly that my devotee will never be vanquished. And it doesn't mean material vanquishment, because we are all going to die. We're all going to leave this body. But if you become a devotee, then your spirit soul, you actually start to identify as a spirit soul in relation with the Supreme Spirit Soul, God, Krishna, and you have a perfect relationship. And so at the moment of death, you're actually on that platform of consciousness. You're not on this bodily consciousness anymore. And so because you're already there, you just go back to the spiritual world. But it's not like nowadays, everybody just thinks anybody who dies, you know, basically it's like, everybody who goes to the graveyard goes to heaven. No, that's not how it works. You gotta be, Prabhupada says you gotta be 100% devoted to Krishna, like 100%. And even the devotees asked Prabhupada one time when he said that in a lecture, one has to be 100%, you know, devoted to Krishna, you know the story. You know? And the devotees put up their hands, Prabhupada, 100% devoted? And Prabhupada was like, 90%. and so then they were walking out, and then another devotee sort of said, Prabhupada, 90%? Prabhupada said 80%. And then I think it might have even been, it was either that time or the next time, somebody again put up their hand and said, Prabhupada, 80%? 70% and that's it. But Prabhupada said, don't worry, I have a key to the back door. So, you know, when we are all serving our guru, whoever your gurus may be, you are actually also in line to go in the back door with Prabhupada, because your guru is connecting you to Prabhupada and the Prabhupada. Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. Founder Acharya is a very specific position within Vedic understanding of disciplic successions. And so somebody who actually founds a line that will continue on for a long period of time. And Prabhupada said that this ISKCON movement will go on for the next 10,000 years. And Prabhupada is just right at the beginning. It's very similar to, I don't know if you've heard of a Ramanujacharya. He's a great saint who lived in India, and he was also a founder, Acharya, of the Ramanujacharya movement. And it's interesting that in the book about the founder Acharya, the book that everybody's supposed to read, you know, before taking initiation. Now, you know, finding, understanding Prabhupada's position as founder Acharya. In the, I think it's either the foreword or preface of something, Bhakti True Maharaj, one of our Prabhupada's disciples, he writes there that in the same way that the Ramanujacharya movement Ramanuja is the one who is really taking everybody back to Godhead. But the followers of Ramanuja, who are going out and meeting people and making other followers, they are all directing everybody back. So it's like everybody's getting directed back through Ramanuja. But it's not Ritvikism, because they're still getting initiated by these, you know, sannyasis that are down the line. So he said, Bhakti True Maharaj actually says in there that that is the model that we should follow in ISKCON. He essentially, I'm paraphrasing. But because if we connect everybody to Srila Prabhupada, I mean, essentially, if your guru says chant 16 rounds, what did Prabhupada say? Chant 16 rounds. Your guru says follow the 4 regular principles. Prabhupada said follow the 4 regular principles. The guru says, you know, serve the deity or go out on Harinam or book distribution or, you know, serving the devotees or cleaning the bathroom, whatever it is, Prabhupada would be saying exactly the same thing. And Prabhupada often said guru is one. You know, if a real guru will speak exactly what all the other gurus are speaking. He doesn't speak anything different. It may, when you first read it, it may be a little different, but actually, you can see that it actually, what is it? You know, what's that word?
A mood is different. Mood is different.
Mood, yeah, the mood might be a little different and the understanding is a little different, but it coalesces, it comes together. Oh, geez, I can't remember the word. Anyway, you know, so guru is one. And so as long as your guru is telling you, then you're tied right up to Srila Prabhupada. And you can, you know, and your guru will take you to Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada will take you on, and back home you go.
It's different manifestation of guru. This.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, guru could manifest as many different people, but the understanding that comes out is the same. So guru is one, but may appear differently to different people.
Yes, it's a perfect time.
Oh, is it? Okay. Sorry if I, you know, went over time or
It was not wasted.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Time works for us now.
What's that?
Time works for us now.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Time works for you. You know, really, it is. It's just if you're really a devotee and you're tying into the internal energy, time is on your side. If you're thinking that everything in the material world is for me, then time is not on your side and will decay all of that. So,
Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai!